Hey everyone, welcome back. Alex here today, and I want to make a quick video on how to effectively manage your time, or really 5 tips and tricks for people that are busy. Busy with real life, busy outside of the game. This is how to play EVE Online if you're a busy person. So real quick, just jumping into this here. Again, I don't have a whole lot of footage to really demonstrate things, but there's one portion where I can demonstrate something, but the rest is just going to be kind of advice that I'm going to pass along, just mostly from experience. Now, EVE Online has kind of an impression that in order to really get ahead in EVE Online, you've got to spend an enormous amount of time in EVE Online in order to do so. Well, that's actually not true. EVE Online is actually, believe it or not, one of the more time-friendlier MMORPGs. And the reason I say that is that the skill system in EVE Online is not tied directly to your activity. You open up your character sheet, as we'll see here in just a second, so I jump through. Yeah. So you open up your skill sheet here with kind of an interesting face, and you decide on a skill and you click the button and off you go. You have your skills, and it's not tied to your active play time. It's just tied to the amount of time it takes to learn the skill, which means you could be playing the game, you could be doing something completely different, you could be on vacation, you will learn skills the same way. And that is incredibly nice for very busy people. What people tend to get caught up in, though, is one of the first traps I want to talk about, and that is always trying to do everything that the game has to offer rather than taking kind of what I call a slice of life approach. EVE Online is so big and so huge that you can do essentially anything in this game, and it's wonderful. But a lot of people kind of fall into the trap of trying to do everything, or they think they need to do everything in order to experience EVE Online, when that's not really true. It's better to take more of a thin slice of one aspect of EVE Online and run with it rather than dabbling in one thing or the next and always trying to stay on top of everything. So it's better to be like a full-time pirate or a full-time mission runner or full-time miner rather than doing one thing one day, doing one thing the next day, doing one thing the next thing, and you have to manage all of them, which means you're wearing a whole bunch of hats in order to stay on top of everything. Okay, one day you're blasting rats in a mission site and you got to move all the salvage. The next day you're mining and now you have to move all the ore around. The next day you're doing exploration and you're moving all over the place. And a lot of time is just going to be eaten up in just moving around, when it's much better to stay in one spot and focus on one thing and accumulate what you're doing rather than going into dibs and drabs and everything. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2, which kind of falls into that, is to specialize. Specialize your skills and specialize your activity. So again, rather than going here and there, you can become more effective when you stick with one thing, because you only need one set of ships, you only need one set of skills, and particularly earlier on, if you're early in your EVE career, you can't do everything. So you're not going to be that efficient with your material, with your skill training, with your focus when you are also kind of doing everything. I do encourage at the very beginning to try everything, just so you would get a good idea of what you like or what you don't like. But once you have a good sense of what you want to do, it's better to stick to that and get really good at it. And then when you decide to switch, make the switch and don't go back to what you were doing before. You can, but don't make it every day, as I pointed out before. So that's tip number 2, is focus and specialize, especially earlier on in your EVE career, and you'll be a lot more effective for it. Number 3, and this is probably the most important one of the whole bunch. A lot of the times we just find ourselves in the position of being at the beck and call of our corporations, when that should not be the case. Corporations try to do a lot with a little, and while that is admirable, it doesn't really help you as a player a whole lot, or really at all. You need to be able to step away from having your corporation or your alliance asking you to do everything. So as I mentioned before, there was a good friend of mine. He got caught up in the fact that he was the logistical slave in a certain sense, and he had to take care of all the towers, he had to take care of all the movement of the logistics, and he was almost putting in a full-time job just trying to keep up with everything, and he didn't have to. His corporation and his alliance kind of peer pressured him, and really he was just one of those good Samaritans that always stood up to the plate. And unfortunately, there are just some, or even more than a few, of organizations that will take advantage of that, and you don't want to be in that position, and nor should you be. If you're busy, you have a life outside of the game, you can't be asked to handle all the logistical problems of your corporation, or all the leadership problems of your organization, or all the activity, or being demanded that you log in every single day and be in combat operations. That is not what this game is about. And really what those corporations are trying to do is they have a very limited set of people that they can rely on, and they're trying to do things that are much more outsized or much more larger than the size of their corporation is able to handle. So that is all about ambition, and a lot of people think it's about leadership, when actually it's not. That corporation, if it's asking that much of its player base, asking that much of you, either you need to step away from that corporation, or that corporation needs to step up their recruiting, and not just recruit their friends or whoever the top pilots are, the most skill points, or whoever paints the code board red with the blood of their enemies. They need a much more diverse set of skill sets than just people who are great at combat or someone who is just great at mining. They need everyone to handle everything rather than asking you or the good Samaritans of their corporation to do it for them. So if you find yourself in the position of having a corporation or an alliance demanding hours and hours of your real life time in a game, it's time to step away from that. It's okay to take a slice of that, because you may only have 30 minutes, you may only have 1 hour, you may only have 10 minutes. You should be able to do something in that space of time that is valuable and appreciated, and not be essentially put on a guilt trip of, oh, you're not picking up the slack, or you're not a team player or anything. If you hear that, leave. You only have maybe a half hour of your time to play the game. They need to recognize that and say, hey, we need more people. We have too much work to do. We need more people. I mean, this is what we're hitting in real life. In my company, we don't have enough people. We're hiring more people. And that's what it all comes down to. So that is the big thing. Be very, very careful of social pressure. That is the one thing that really drives people to play this game far more than is really required. It is actually more due to social pressure than what the game actually requires. And it's important to recognize that. And it's okay to step away. It's okay to go solo. It's okay just to do something simple on the side and still really enjoy this game. So that's very important. Next tip. Unload your logistics. If there's anything that I've noticed and that I've been guilty of, is always trying to save an ISK or a buck, and trying to doing a lot of my logistical housekeeping by myself. And really that's not really required. And this is where I can demonstrate in game here a little bit. This button, contracts, makes life a whole lot easier. Now, a lot of people, when they see contracts, they think, oh, this is the official scam button of EVE Online. I hit this button, I could scam people. This is great. No. There have been scams in contracts, in fact, quite a few of them, but there are actually a lot of very useful tools here, and make use of them, okay? So here you can make a contract, and the most important one that I have found is the courier contract. Item exchange, not really so much useful for the solo pilot. That's more for corporations and alliances when they have specific ship doctrines and builds that they want people to use. They can just hand over some ISK or something, and they get that whole package, which is great. But courier contracts is really just, it's a huge time saver. I deal a lot with planetary interaction. I deal with a lot of planetary goods, and I need to move stuff to the main market, which is JITA, and maybe buy some things and move them back to my base of operations, either in Molden Heath or in Iridia or something like that. Make use of this. Don't try and be cheap. Don't say, okay, well, yeah, you could transport everything. You could put everything into an industrial ship or deep space transport or freighter and do it yourself. In fact, you can even have the ISK to do so, but you don't need to plunk that much time into it. So I had a freighter and my alt was maxed out. Minmatar Freighter 5. I can easily move everything I needed to move with a freighter, but even though, yeah, it was through HiSec, you really can't leave a freighter alone, especially when you go through known ganking systems like Uedama and Yarja and others. You still need to be there, and that is still a time sink when you play EVE Online. Contracts are a huge time save, and what you're really doing is you're trading some ISK for a lot of time, and that time that you're saving is time that you can really be doing what you want to play EVE Online. Think of the amount of time you spend on EVE Online. How much is actually really playing EVE Online and how much is actually housekeeping and logistics and moving things? Take that stuff and offload it. Okay, so for example here, I have some stuff here and I want to move it around. Okay, I'll select all. Next, make a contract. Okay, 30,000 worth of cargo. Okay. And let's say I want to ship this to JITA. Put it in there. This is something that you need to keep in mind though, and that is don't make a rush contract. If you need to get something there real quick like that, you have to really chuck this out. If you need to move stuff back and forth, make sure they're not too much of a rush or you're just selling things on market. Okay, so maybe you have like a week, for example. Take the estimated price of the collateral. Now there's two ideas when it comes to collateral. If you're moving stuff to market to sell, you want to bump this up a little bit. Let's say 200 million, for example, or a few more zeros. Again, you got to check the zeros. There you go, 200 million, and make the reward something that will attract people that will want to move your cargo. Of course, here I'm in low sec, so it'd be something extremely high. In fact, I would not ship it from here. I'd actually move these goods to a high sec drawfall point, but that's as far as I'm going to move it. I'd say I want the reward to be, let's say 750 million per jump. So let's just see where we land with 30 million. Let's see, let's see here. Let's make that 20 million, for example. Let's say 20 million ISK. Okay, so that's a 10% charge. Estimated based on collateral. You can even move it down a little bit. If this was in high sec, I'd probably make it, let's say 15, for example. Okay, I'm willing to give up 15. There was probably 180 base there. Okay, so I make 165 net profit. That's great. 50 million ISK. Here's the thing, that is a time save. So instead of spending what time I have, let's say maybe a half hour or an hour of playing EVE Online, maybe in the morning before work, I am willing to trade 50 million ISK for the hour to actually do something that I enjoy. And not only that, that time could be used to making more money. So I could say 15 million ISK and moving something in an hour, or I can be doing anomalies or combat missions or PvP or mining where I can make a lot more ISK in that time than it would take in saving that ISK in transporting to JITA, for example. So time versus ISK. It's more important to be on station, so to speak, and doing what you need to be doing rather than trying to save a buck. Yeah, think about where you're most effective and where your real earning power is located at. Okay, and that's the trade-off. It's more important to be, again, on station rather than shuttling things around. You have contracts, you have people who enjoy moving things around. They have the freighters. That's how they play the game, and there's never enough contracts to move things around. They are just always desperate for contracts. Now, one key thing though, again, never move contracts from a citadel to a citadel. Don't start a contract in a citadel, and especially don't end a contract in a citadel. Those are where the real scams are. No one trusts them. Station to station only, and that's it. Never set up a contract that will go to a citadel. So that's important. Also, use things cancel it out. Use things that will help in hauling around. There is a specific hauler channel called Hauler's Channel. You can put up your contract, you can get advice. You know, things can make things really easier. Also, there's a mailing list as well. So if you find yourself moving material a lot, like you're dealing with raw materials, mining, or ice goods and things like that, this just helps you in a big way. I actually sold off my freighter. I don't use my freighter anymore. I sold it, took the money, and now all I need is a deep space transport, a blockade runner, and things like that, and I'm good to go. That's all I need. And I was able to keep that as a profit, helped expand some of my industrial operations, and we're all set. Okay, last point. Have one active and one passive profession. So what do I mean by that? So an active profession is anything that you do that requires you to actually actively play in the game. So any kind of PvP, combat, anomalies, mining, things of that sort, where you need active participation to either get further in game, to make is blow things up, blow up your friends, whatever, all that good stuff. And have one passive occupation. What's a passive occupation? So that's things that run in the background while you can do something else. This is something that can really help you enhance your ISK making capability, or things that you can enjoy on the side and kind of mix things up a little bit. These include things like planetary interaction, research and development, industry, trading, sales, contract writing, as I just mentioned. All these things where you do a little bit of activity just for a few minutes, maybe 5-10 minutes, and you're done. Have that going on in the background and then do something active. That's one way to really maximize the time you have in EVE. So my benchmark in EVE Online is to be able to play 30 minutes and really accomplish something significant in the game. And then if I log off and I go away, I go do something else, I spend time with the wife, or I'm at work, or I play a different game, I have really accomplished something of significance, and that's measurable in EVE Online, and that's all that EVE Online requires from me. Okay, so anyways, that is what I would suggest, and those are the tips and tricks that I would recommend for really busy people that play EVE Online. EVE Online does not need to be a time sink. It only is a time sink if you let it. So anyways, I'll leave it here, guys. Take care, have fun, enjoy EVE Online, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace out.